it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. In this week's video, I'm going to be making a doll sculpture out of things that I found at the dollar store. This is actually a video that I started October of last year, and it took me this long to finish it. And in that time, I actually got a new phone. So there is kind of a difference in quality between various clips in this video, and I apologize for that inconsistency, but there's truly nothing I can do about it now. But hopefully it's not too distracting, and if it is, complain at me. Leave a comment complaining, it helps me. Anyway, let's just hop right into it. So we're starting out by opening up this fashion doll, or poopy mode if you read the French part incorrectly, and getting her out of her box. I decided to open up all of her accessories and see what she came with, and I wasn't terribly impressed, but you know, I mean, it's cute. I might repaint these things and use them for something else later. These shoes are comical because this girl truly does not have feet. But, you know, let's get her naked and really assess what's going on here. She has mitten hands and no toes, and her neck peg is, a very interesting shape. But let's move on and start getting her prepped. I'm cutting off her little ponytail and then scraping out the inside of her head with a screwdriver to remove the remaining plugs. Next, I remove all the remaining hair still inside her head through a big cut in the back of it because I'm too lazy to use her neck hole. Next, I need to assess her body, so I'm just yanking her arms off because I hated them, and I'm replacing them with the wings of this bat skeleton Halloween decoration that I bought around the time I started this project. I actually use these a lot, so every year around Halloween, I stock up on as many Bad Anatomy Halloween decorations as I can because I love using the little parts to add to dolls. I hoard a lot of these torso pieces because I don't know what to do with them, but I'm afraid to throw them away. Next, I tried to puzzle out how exactly I wanted to attach these to the doll, and I decided I needed to remove this little shoulder joint piece, the shoulder blade of the wing, in order to make it happen. And as you can see, I struggled a bit figuring out how exactly to do it, and for the second one, I just bent it back and forth until it eventually fell off. I realized I need to open up her armholes with an X-Acto knife in order to get the wings positioned how I wanted them to be, and I came to another realization that I needed something for the glue to be able to actually stick onto, because the inside of her body is hollow and I just didn't trust it. So I'm opening up this hole in the back of her back so that I'll be able to shove tinfoil inside so that there's something for the wings to actually anchor to. Then I seal that all in with a very healthy serving of hot glue. And once she's all stuffed with aluminum foil, I could add her wings. While I had the hot glue gun out, I decided to seal up her waist and hip joints. That way I wouldn't have to worry about them moving around while I was sculpting. Now we can move on to the bulk of the project, which is sculpting her body. This doll has some pretty interesting things going on with her body shape, and so I decided to address those. I'm thickening up her legs so that it has a little bit more of a realistic shape and not quite such a massive thigh gap going on in there. I gave her a little bit of a tush because she truly just didn't have one previously. And this whole process took quite a bit of time because there's a lot of drying time that needed to happen in between, and also I've never sculpted this extensively on a doll before. I've given dolls some boobas, before. I've, added little things, but I think this is the most like extensive doll sculpting process that I've really done. So it was a fun little challenge, and it was a fun little process. There was a lot of smoothing happening and a lot of frustration, but we got there eventually. The clay that I'm using for this process is just a simple air dry paper clay. I have to kind of go over it a few times to sort of fill in some of the cracks that form while it's drying, which can sometimes happen if you like over wet it or have like very sort of thin pieces. But, with a little bit of patience and a little bit of time, you can make these sort of less expensive materials work for you. I still don't think she ended up with the most realistic thigh to hip proportions in the end, but I think once her clothes are on and sort of add a little bit more bulk, it's not as noticeable. I'm going to take some time here while I'm bulking out her torso to say, if you watched this far and you liked this video, consider liking it. It really helps me out. And if you have anything you want to see me make, or you have any thoughts and feelings, go ahead and leave those in the comments below. I love hearing from you guys. And if you want to see me make more cool spooky stuff with dolls, consider subscribing. I'm going to try to get back on a more consistent upload schedule, so hopefully you'll be seeing videos from me every other Tuesday. So I originally thought I was going to be putting her into some sort of like corset type deal, which would have like pushed her boobs up a little bit more and have them be kind of defying gravity. And so that's the way I sculpted them. But then time passed and I changed my mind. So she just kind of has a little bit of a gravity defying boob going on. But some people are just born lucky, I guess. This is like the third or fourth time I've had to sculpt some boobas. And I'll tell you, it's kind of a difficult process every single time because there's a bit of symmetry that is asked of you from several different angles because they exist in a 3D space. And it's a very difficult thing to achieve, but I try my best. No, they're sisters, not twins. After a week or so of sculpting and waiting for parts to dry, I was finally able to go in and paint everything a sort of similar skin tone to what she had before. Now I'm going to put her body to the side for a little bit and finally get to work on her face. I went back and forth on maybe swapping out this head for like a different Barbie head with a more defined sculpt, but I decided that'd be kind of cheating and I need to make her original head work. Because the color I painted her body is slightly different than her face, I decided to just go ahead and paint her face as well to make everything match. Here you can see when I started filming again more recently because my background has changed. So she was just kind of sitting around a naked head for quite a while before I finally got around to doing her face up. For this look, I wanted to give her kind of a sultry vibe, so I gave her these kind of more narrow, smoldery kind of eyes. Sorry, quick off topic, because saying that just made me think. So, my husband and I rewatched the movie Spiral recently, and there's this face that Chris Rock makes when he's we're trying to convey the fact that he's like this serious detective, and just saying that has anyone seen that movie? Please tell me what you thought about it, because it's truly one of the most baffling film experiences I've had in a while, and I can't stop thinking about it, so help me. Anyway, I'm just finishing this off with some black lipstick. I decided to give her a little bit of silvery eyeshadow because I thought that'd look really pretty on her skin tone, and just overall giving her this sort of gothy makeup look. I decided to give her a little bit of exposed teeth because the shape of her mouth just looked a little bit weird without them, so I added those in. And I also love how I said I'm finishing it off with the black lipstick, totally forgetting that I had not yet given her eyebrows, so I'm putting those on now. Once the paint is all dry, I'm going in with some chalk pastel to add some subtle shading and dimension around the sides of her face. I'm also going in with some black chalk pastel to add some depth to her eyes. I like to just kind of go over, like really focusing on the upper part of the eye, and then coming in with an eraser later to sort of bring some of that brightness back in so that it's not, too gray all the way down. Now she just needs a couple of dots of white paint for her catch lights, and then she can get all sealed up. I'm just going over her with several very thin watered down coats of liquid sealant. Once I'm done with her face, I can pop back over to her body and start using that chalk pastel to add shading where she needs it, as well as highlights where she needs them. Once that's all blended out, I'm going over her body with that same liquid sealant that I used on her face before moving on to her wings. For her wings, I'm using a mixture of tans, browns, and grays to sort of achieve as much of a sort of semi-realistic bone look as I can. This part is really fun, but it's also kind of tedious because there's so many little bits to get to, and at this point I was, experiencing a little bit of project fatigue, but I'm really happy with how they came out. Any part that I went a little bit too heavy on the chalk pastel, I went back over with an eraser to just sort of help lighten it back up again. And I really focused on defining the joints as much as possible, that way they didn't just look like these long white tubes. Once I finished shading both sides of each wing, I hit those bad boys with some more liquid sealant. I decided that I wanted to use the skull as like a little headpiece, so now I'm also hitting that with some white paint so that I could shade everything with the same chalk pastel technique that I used on her wings, trying to achieve that sort of bone look. Though, for some reason, it was a lot funner to do it on the skull because there's a lot more little shapes and nooks and crannies to get into, and you could really see everything coming to life as I was working on it, so that was fun. And once I was finished with that, of course, I needed to seal in my work. Now I could start working on her platform. So first I'm drilling a hole into this plaque that I bought at Michael's years ago that I'm just now getting around to using, as well as a hole into the bottom of her foot so that I can install a toothpick into the wooden plaque and slide her right on top of it. At this point, I realized I needed to do something to address her really bizarre feet. Originally, I thought maybe I could sculpt some shoes or something on her after she was on the stand, and I realized that wasn't going to work. So instead, what I decided to do was have her be in a graveyard. So here you can see me making a few different tombstones to help fill up the platform as well as cover up her little feet. By the time I got to these, I'd used up all of my other clay, so I'm using a different brand for this one, and it was a little bit more difficult to work with because I think there's something else in there that I think makes it crack less, but also makes it a little bit more difficult to smooth out. For this particular tombstone, I decided to add in the year 1998 because that was the year I was born, and so I thought it'd be a fun little personal touch. And I'm going over it with a kind of crumpled up tinfoil ball to add sort of a rough stone texture to it. This little turd I plan on turning into a cross-shaped tombstone just because I thought I'd add a little bit of variation, and I just think they look neat. Because I hadn't worked with this type of clay before, I was struggling a little bit to get the sides to adhere to each other, and you could see at a certain point I gave up on filming this process because it was taking me a while, but I do end up finishing this. Once the tombstones were all made and mostly dry, they were still kind of a little bit wiggly at the point I was doing this, I can start adhering them to the platform by adding more clay, and I'm sort of doing this motion, I don't really know how to describe it, this little swirly motion with my silicone tool to make this sort of grass texture so that it would look a little bit more interesting and help blend everything in together. Making this grass texture was so satisfying because it's such a simple movement to do, but I think the look is very effective. Once all the clay you add to the platform is dry, you can go in and start adding paint. I based everything out in gray first just to make it a little bit easier, and I'm going in and painting the grass this very dark bluish green because I want it to look more like grass at nighttime as opposed to grass on a bright sunny day. And I'm going over everything with a wash of very watered down black acrylic paint to sort of get it to go into the little grooves and add some more depth and sort of bring out the details of the sculpture a little bit more. Once that wash is all dry, I'm going in with a brighter shade of all of the paint to dry brush everything to once again bring back out that texture. So I'm using a lighter green on the grass and then a lighter gray on the tombstones to dry brush everything. And if you're doing something like this and you find you sort of push something too far in one direction, you could sort of go back and forth between dry brushing and doing washes to get an effect that you want. Once that's all done and dry, I'm going around the edge of the platform and just painting everything black to help clean everything up and make it look more polished and complete. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Ace of Clay because it was from his videos that I got the idea to use one of these wooden plaques as a platform for a sculpture. Otherwise, I probably would have never gotten use out of this thing. At this point, I can finally start assembling everything. So I put on her head and I start getting ready to make her little outfit. I'm just using some strips of this sort of chiffon table runner that I bought for a project a while ago, and I'm just making this little dress out of it. I actually made these pieces by taking some strips of the fabric and folding them over on themselves and like Mod Podging it together so that it'd be a little bit more stiff and easier to control. I think it was around this point that I started getting kind of frustrated with this project because I think I had a different idea in my mind for what I wanted her to be wearing, and it just wasn't going exactly how I had planned, and I'd already spent so much time on it. But looking back at this footage now, like, I think she's cute. Like, obviously I'm not done with it yet, but like, I don't know why I was so mad. Off camera, I finished up the dress by adding a couple of pieces of lace around her waist and her neck, and now I'm going in with some chalk pastel in the same colors that I used for the bone parts of this project to help weather her dress a little bit and make it match everything else and not be quite so blindingly white. And I'm using a wet paper towel to help blend everything out. Now she's in need for some hair. For this, I was able to just use some leftover black yarn wefts that I had from a different project because she doesn't have that much head, so she doesn't need that much hair to cover it. So I was able to just use up these leftovers, and I think it ended up working out almost perfectly in terms of how much hair I had left versus how much hair I needed. I decided to just give her a simple side part because the top of her head's going to get covered by a skull anyway, so I don't really need to do anything super fancy here. But I still decided to give her a proper part by gluing these wefts in the opposite direction and folding them over. Once her hair is settled, I can finally add the skull. And once I put it on, I realized it didn't really sit how I thought it would. So I'm adding some faux flowers as well as some faux reindeer moss to help fill that gap a little bit. And once I added these things, she really ended up with a lot more of a nature-y vibe than I was expecting. Like before, I was going for like kind of spooky graveyard specter, but now she looks a lot more benevolent. So I don't know, it's up to you guys what you think her story is. But now I'm also adding that reindeer moss to her platform to help tie everything together, and once that's done, she'll be complete. And here are her final results. I really think she came out very cute, and if you also think she came out cute, she will be available for purchase upon the uploading of this video. So if you check out the link in the description for my store, you can perhaps buy her there if you want her. But yeah, that's it for this video. Hope to see y'all next time. Love you, bye!